All right. Hello, everybody. It's great to see all these new faces or people that I haven't seen in a while. We've got a great lineup of speakers, a couple of whom are here, a couple of them who aren't. Anyway, it is always a joy when our first speaker, State Representative Vikki Goodwin, is able to spend some time with us. Vikki is serving her third term representing Texas House District 47, which includes western parts of Austin, Bee Cave, parts of Lake Travis. And her district used to include Lago Vista, but we all got gerrymandered into a district that's now represented by Ellen Troxclair until Dwayne Handley beats her in November. So in Vikki's tenure at the legislature, she's been successful in working across the aisle, working with Republicans to actually get a number of bills passed that serve her district and the state. And you'll probably remember Katie's Act, which is based on a tragedy that happened in Jonestown, and got a good law to help prevent future tragedies like that. Vikki also filed a set of bills to address public school funding, gun safety, environmental protection, and more. And she was co-author on a bill to increase state employee salaries and provide a cost of living increase to retired teachers. And some of them, because Democrats' bills don't always make it all the way to law, some of them didn't make it. But anyhow, Vikki's a hardworking representative. I wish she was still our representative. Vikki's also a small business owner. She's a real estate broker and a community leader who's been active in multiple community organizations. She has bachelor's and master's degrees from University of Texas, and she lives in Austin, where she's raised her children, who are now grown. And you're going to hear a whole lot more about Vikki in the near future. I won't talk too much about that unless you want to. But she's here today not to talk about her campaign for this session, but as a surrogate for Colin Allred, our next Democratic senator.
Well, good afternoon. It's always such a pleasure to come out and speak to the North Shore Democrats. So yeah, I'm here today on behalf of Colin Allred. I am one of the surrogate speakers for him. I know he would love to be everywhere all the time, but it's a big state. And so several of us are surrogate speakers for him. And the really cool thing is I have gotten to know him fairly well over the last several years. It just coincidentally, we both grew up in Dallas and went to the same high school, Hillcrest High School. Okay, I graduated a few years before he did. I graduated in 1985, so next year will actually be our 40th year. And some of my classmates reached out to me and let me know that Hillcrest recently did kind of a mural inside the front hallway, and it's a timeline from the day it opened in the late 1930s all the way to today. And in the 1980s, the picture actually has some of my classmates. And I was really excited. I thought, wow, cool, maybe I'm on that picture. So I went recently. I have not been back to my high school probably since graduating. But I went back to see this mural, and sure enough, there are some of my friends and my mom. My mom was super involved when I was growing up in the PTA. And I tell that story because Colin Allred and I both have really strong moms that made a huge impression on us. His mom was a school teacher, a public school teacher. He went through public schools. And so, of course, he is very much behind our public schools. But at the federal level, they have less impact. Of course, they do require testing and accountability, and they do provide some funding, but it's only 10%. But of course, in Texas, that is probably the number one issue going on these days. And I know that he cares about our public schools, not just because he attended them and because his mom was a teacher there, but because he has 2 young children himself. And that's one of the things that I think is so awesome. He was the first congressperson to take parental leave when his kids were born. He understands the importance of those early years of a child's life, and as well as K through 12 and on. So I also got to meet Colin Allred when I went to Washington, D.C. Y'all remember the quorum break where the Democrats went up to Washington, D.C. trying to keep election bills from passing. We knew we couldn't stay there forever, and unfortunately, we did have to come back, and we did unfortunately have bills that passed that took what was successful in Harris County, the overnight voting, the drive-through voting, things that made it easier for people who work a lot to have access to the polls. And of course, we passed legislation that changed that. But I was happy to at least be able to amend one of those bills. So y'all might recall also one of the things that we did was change vote by mail. On the back of the envelopes now, you have to put either your social security number or your driver's license number, I think the last 4 digits or something. Anyway, they were making it more difficult, changing the process around vote by mail. We as Democrats knew that we couldn't kill that bill, but we could amend it. And so I added an amendment that says if you're about to give birth or just gave birth at election time, you can now vote by mail. Did y'all know that? So the only thing is afterwards I regretted I didn't add more time. I just kept it to 3 weeks before and 3 weeks after, thinking it wasn't going to pass. It was a Democratic amendment. And then when it passed, because I talked about the woman and her baby and how important that is to everybody and we want to take care of them. And it passed, and I was like, dang, I should have asked for 3 months. But, you know, that's something that Colin Allred and I have in common, is that voting rights are so critical to democracy. He is a voting rights attorney. So after he graduated from Hillcrest, he went to Baylor University, and he always thanks his education and the opportunities that he had through his public schools. Went to Baylor, played football, then played for the NFL. And it was during that experience where he got knocked down, he was laying on the field, and I remember him telling this story. It was at that point he said, you know what, I think it's time to go to law school. So he did. He went to law school. He's a civil rights attorney. When we came up to Washington, D.C. for the quorum break, he met with us, and we had a great conversation. He's such a personable guy. You know that he cares about all people, but he's also a realist. You know, whether you're in D.C. or in the Texas legislature, we have to figure out ways to work with across the aisle. That's the reality. If you want to get bills passed, you have to get some Republicans working with you. And how do you do that? You build relationships. And so while I disagree with many of the Republicans on many issues, we always find some place of common ground, and we work from that place. And so just recently, y'all might have heard that he was endorsed by Liz Cheney. And so again, I think, you know, he is working, knowing what the environment is here in Texas, how difficult it's been to get a Democrat elected statewide. We haven't done that in 30 years. And so he knows that it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take getting some Republicans behind him. And so what a great endorsement coming from Liz Cheney. You know, she's also endorsed Kamala Harris. And I just have to say that since Kamala Harris has become the top of the ticket, the enthusiasm around the state is incredible. So I've been doing a lot of traveling recently as a surrogate speaker and just talking to people about the bills that I've passed, because while I represent House District 47, the laws that I've passed impact the entire state. So it's really important for people around the state to know what those bills are, because the media don't always talk about Rep. Goodwin's bills, or probably the same, Rep. Allred's bills. But I was also asked to talk about the environment, and one of the big things that happened was the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and that did incredible things for our green energy here in Texas. 17,000 new jobs created in clean energy as a result of that bill. Colin Allred was for it. He put out a statement for it, but guess what? Who voted against it? Ted Cruz. And that's typical, that he will vote against bills, but then he'll come to the state and talk about all the accomplishments. You know, similarly, the CHIPS Act, Ted Cruz voted against it. But he'll come to Texas and he'll talk about the good jobs that were created in the semiconductor industry. But he voted against these bills. You know, it's just crazy. And that's the thing, that we've got to work really, really hard as Democrats to get our message out. Because honestly, we are doing the right thing, and Republicans will say the right thing, but they're doing the wrong thing. And sometimes people don't have the time to do the research to know what's really happening. And here's a story that I will tell more about the legislature and back home, how these Republicans behave. Oftentimes it's because of the scorecard. They get scored based on their votes, right? And so they don't want to look like they're supporting Democratic bills. So as was mentioned, I passed Cotty's Act because of a drowning. And it turns out that the family lived in Jonestown, and they, in redistricting, were taken out of my district. But you know, I will borrow the words of Congressman Doggett. I may not be your representative, but I will represent you. And so with that family, I wanted to continue carrying the bill. Since we had gotten it through the House, not through the Senate, I wanted to try again, this time to get it all the way and passed into law. And so they agreed to let me carry it. But since Representative Troxclair is now their representative, they wanted her to be a joint author. That's fine. I'm happy to share and try to work across the aisle. So she did. She became a joint author. But it came up for a vote. She voted against it. Had nothing to do with the policy, had nothing to do with anything except for the fact that the bill author had a D behind my name. And it would lower her score on the Texas scorecard. That's just the way the Republicans are. So again, you know, Colin Allred's doing amazing. The latest poll shows that he is the point ahead. Now there are all kinds of polls, all kinds of ways to ask the question. So, you know, polling, I know a lot of us are real skeptical of polls these days, but consistently polls are showing them neck and neck. And so I think what that tells me is that we've got to do the work. And, you know, it seems like I was brought up in a household where we were told you vote every election. And so I have voted every election. I do recall the hardest time for me to vote was when I had just had babies, which is thus the reason for that amendment to allow women who have just given birth to vote by mail. But I guess it hasn't been drilled into everybody the way it was drilled into me, because some people take more encouragement. Some people take knocks on the door. Some people take phone calls. You know, in some cases, it just really takes that repeated effort. And so it's going to be our job to make sure Colin Allred and Kamala Harris, the Harris Walz ticket, get past the mark here in Texas. You know, I truly believe that we can do it. Polls are showing that we can do it. But it's going to take each and every one of us in this room doing the work of reaching out, whether it is through the Reach app. Anyone here familiar with Reach? A few of you? Or whether it's knocking on doors, or whether it is reaching out directly to the campaigns. And you can reach out to the Colin Allred campaign if y'all want to pull your phones out and do it right now. I'm perfectly happy with you doing that. But you can text to 90678. I'm going to grab my paper and make sure I get the right thing. Yep, I was right. So text 90678, and that will allow you to sign up as a volunteer for his campaign. And they will let you know how you can help beyond that. So more recently, I mentioned that I got to meet Colin Allred back in DC, but he's been in the Austin area a few times. Anyone able to meet him face to face? So I will tell you, it's really incredible to hear him in person. And I was really thrilled when I was asked to host him at my home, for a fundraiser. This was about a month ago, and I agreed to do it, and it was an experiment to see how many people I could fit inside my house so that we didn't have to go stand outside and sweat in the August heat with him speaking outside. We managed about 100 people squeezed into my home. But he's so phenomenal when he speaks. I wish that you had the opportunity to hear him in person, because then you can see how genuinely he cares about people. You know, I've heard some critiques, and I tell you what, when you're running for office, people can tell you all sorts of things, like you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And so there's been a few critiques, like he hasn't come out to our area, or he seems stiff, or he's not criticizing Ted Cruz enough. So here's my response to all that. Texas is a really big state. He's not going to be able to get to every single area, but he is traveling a lot. He actually went to Blanco. So they held a fundraiser for him there. He is going to some small towns. He's been to Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio repeatedly. He's meeting with the unions. He's meeting with as many groups as he can. He's doing small events, big events. He's not Beto. Not Beto. He's not doing the rallies like Beto did, but he is an amazing candidate. He's amazing when you meet him in person. He will do a good job. He will not be going off to Cancun in the next emergency. So the critique about him not being everywhere, it's just he is one person. If we had clones, he'd be able to do it. The critique about him seeming cold, that's his personality. You gotta give the man a break. He is who he is. And then the critique about him not criticizing Cruz, tell you what, go on Instagram, look at the commercials that he's got out there, because he definitely critiques Cruz. And one of the situations was this family whose son got arrested in Russia. The family went to Ted Cruz and asked for help, and Cruz's office said, no, we can't help you, but Colin Allred helped. And so that young man was released. And so, you've got the congressman who's going to help. You've got Ted Cruz who is not representing. So let's hear it for Colin Allred.